Hey everybody, Texas Truck here, Lance's Performance Shop, Lone Star Mopars.com. This Saturday night, cranking out a few videos for you. This one is going to be in the Ram Revival. What we're doing here, we're kind of showcasing some of the cool parts, the high-end stuff, the upgrades that we're going to throw on for the truck. And what we have here is from HiPoTek. HiPoTek, interesting company. It's one of the very few that's dedicated specifically to the Magnum family of engines, the 5.2, 5.9. Of course, he does do some things, you know, for like the 3.9 V6 and some late model Hemis, but bread and butter, what got Richard going, of course, was 5.2, 5.9 Magnums. Dakotas in particularly, I believe he pilots a 408 Dakota. Has been doing it for years and still faithful to the craft, so very cool there. But what this is, we have taken a look at our Edelbrock air gap, kind of, you know, the Hughes version, if you will. And what we need to tie in with that is fuel rails. Stock fuel rails will work. It's kind of, I wouldn't say it's janky the way you have to rig it up. I just say it certainly leaves a lot to be desired in terms of aesthetics. And that is where this comes into play. Price point here, let me step back and see if I can find that. $259.95. So basically 260 bucks. That's a little steep. I would agree with that, but this is just, there's not people competing for this. Richard's like the guy that's doing it that benefits everyone, as opposed to, you know, well, you know, I'll just go buy it from Aeromotive, or, you know, let me see what Deechworks charges. There's just, nobody does Magnum stuff, right? And so we're very fortunate that someone like Richard actually does this. As best I understand it, this is something that probably gets in, you know, like blank rails and just machines it to fit, to spec for the Magnum. And I could have had this rolled out ahead of time, but I mean, what point would that have served, right? I've got to make it dramatic. So, if you know me, you know blue. That's a fail-safe color option, right? And essentially, we're going to have some things to talk about on this sucker. So, you'll note one side completely blank. The other side, we've got two tiny, tiny little, what is that, a hole? Is it tapped, you're saying? That is tapped. That is a tapped hole into the aluminum body. We've got the port right there, and then we've got two on this bank, two on that bank. That's of course going to be for our injectors. And then right here, we've kind of got a port and another port. Let's go ahead and grab this one and get it out of the way. So it's going to be a similar setup. We're going to have the two holes drilled right there. We're going to have the four ports for our injectors. You'll note this one does not have anything here, right? That's the stark contrast. You're thinking, well, what else is different? Nothing. That's it. Okay. So what this is, to kind of put it in a nutshell for you, all right? The way these rails are going to work, obviously, your two ports on either end, those are going to be where your injectors plug in. That means that we are going to have fuel feed in to the rail, all right? The fuel feed is going to be right here. What that's going to allow us to do, this is actually set up for a Dash 6 O-ring fitting, and I have got some stuff which will allow me to essentially mate up to the factory fuel line. You know, the factory fuel line uses the push connect, right? This is what we're going to be able to do here with that one. And then, of course, you're thinking, okay, well, how do you get fuel to the other side? Well, if you pay attention to your stock fuel rails, you've got a line out the back, right? It just kind of loops over. It's that really weird, really hard to work with, like plastic material. Richard sells kits with all these fittings. You can just buy it. You have everything that you need. You can throw it on. Me personally, I do enough with AN lines. I can just kind of whip up my own, and I can select my own aesthetics for it, and, you know, finishes and everything, which I think he gives you a couple options. But, you know, I've just, like I said, I'm versed. I've got the equipment. I know what I want to do. I at least have a rough idea of what I want to do, and I can make it happen. So for me, not a huge loss. But this side here, we'll have our loop crossover, and then coming to this side, you're thinking, wait, wasn't there a hole there? What happens there? You simply cap it, right? So you can structure it however you want to if you follow suit with the factory configuration. This is our front side of the engine, the radiator. This is the firewall. We would be capped on these two holes, and then back here we would have our crossover. So that's about all there is to it. If you're saying, wait, what in the world are these? Well, this is where he's this is kind of where you would pay the money, right? This is why you would say, hey, you know, let me buy that from HiPoTek. This is going to allow me the distinct advantage of using these. All right, so I've got a bag here. There's 3 in it. That's because I pulled one out. This is simply a stand, a brace, a leg, whatever you want to call it. It's going to allow us to run from the base of the intake up to the proper height to position our fuel injectors. If you're thinking, hey, why isn't that anodized? You know, that's not going to look right. This is stainless, which is awesome. Again, it's not going to wear, it's not going to rust. It's going to be easy to maintain. If it does get surface rust, if you want to anodize it, by all means, go ahead. But this is just takes all the guesswork out of it, and it makes for a way cleaner installation than reusing the factory fuel rails. Which, don't get me wrong, the factory fuel rails, you could clean them up, paint them, you could, you know, shoot a custom color on them, but this is just going to look significantly better. So coming in back here, I had 2 hex keys, right? Because, you know, you're probably going to need to want to know this. Right here, the yellow one, brand new from VHA, 330 seconds. It doesn't have a size stamp on it. The Vera one does. So you're thinking, hey, why do I need to know that? That's a random size. Well, if you take a look, those holes are really small, right? Well, included is a button head cap screw, and it is going to be 330 seconds. That's the size that you are going to need to tighten that up. As you can see right there, Vera, typical excellence with the hex keys. So 330 seconds will be the size that you will need to tighten that up. This is kind of a bonus run for you. And I realize now I think I need this to be different than what I got. But I have a couple of fittings here. If you decide to go and do your own thing, again, AN fittings and liners expensive. I want to say it might cost probably another 150, 200 bucks, which again, you know, if you're set up to do it yourself, you know what you're doing. It's not, you know, you can save quite a bit of money there. But this right here, I think I screwed up because what it is, it's a 5/16 fuel rail fitting, and this would be the push lock, just like the factory. You know, if you come in and you say, hey, that does look like the factory, that's because it is. And this will allow me to basically thread that in there and hook up to the factory fuel line. The catch is, I think, while this is 6A in and will thread in there, I think I need an O-ring fitting on that. So that's something I'll have to correct. Not a huge deal, because I actually had these to test something out with. And as I mentioned, we're going to have the back end fitting here. I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to go 90s or 45s or what just yet. I also wasn't quite sure what aesthetic I wanted to have. So I did cut these open. Fantastic. I'm used to tearing these, and now that I've got nice scissors, I just literally cut them, and then I don't ever think of that until after the fact. So I knew I had mocked this up there. Did I cut this one as well? No. Anyway, this is what I can take your feedback on. Now, there's a good chance by the time you see this, I will have already made my decision and gone to town. But again, one side here, we'll say the front, which is how I'm going to structure it. We have to cap this. We can't have it open. We can't have it shooting 58 pounds of pressurized fuel across the room. The catch with anything anodized is, if you're buying it from the same brand, it's usually the same hue, the same color tone. If you're mixing brands, if you've got Earls, Russell, Frigola, House Brand X, you know, Chinese stuff from the parts store, even though it's all quote-unquote blue anodized, it's probably not going to match. So what I've had really good luck with is just Summit's fittings. They don't seem to be any inferior to any of the stuff that costs sometimes 2 to 3 times as much for the exact same fitting. And so I brought this in to kind of see how I thought it would look. Right there, again, you know, probably not like the best angle we could have for it, but you can see the Summit fitting is a little bit darker, right? It's not super objectionable, but it is noticeable regardless of which way I turn this, whatever amount of light we have coming in. It's just, this is a darker shade of blue than the fuel rail. Again, it just could come down to individual anodizers, which plant did it. Even at the same plant, you know, if he does this batch of fuel rails and then maybe I come in 5 years and buy another set, it could be slightly different. It's just how it works, right? So I wanted to see what I thought would look better. And oftentimes I've wound up going with like the nickel finish that you see on this one. Just because it's complementary regardless of the shade of blue. And when there's the contrast between the colors, sometimes that bothers me more than having something shiny and kind of contrasting that I typically wouldn't like. If this was a situation where I could get the exact same color, by all means, that's probably what I would do. But here it is. Let me try to find somewhere you can see this well. That might be a sweet spot there. It's just so hard because of the light reflecting at different angles, right? But these are our choices, essentially. Now, you can do a lot of other things. You could do black. That would actually not look terrible either. But I want to know from you, the people watching the Ram Revival, maybe the Tool Haul carryover people, standard Ram reviewer audience, however many of you there may or may not be at this point in time. What I want to know, which one of these do you like better? Do you like the nickel or do you like the blue anodized? Me personally, they both look okay. It may come down to what fittings I can find available over here. Now, initial thoughts when I brought this stuff in, obviously by getting this, I was kind of thinking, hey, maybe I'll just run the nickel and see how that pans out. Which, like I said, when you try to start running the blue anodized fittings over here, you run into the situation where you're going to have to buy a lot of fittings and mix and match nickel and blue, because I don't like the red. Certain cars, certain builds I would, but the blue and the red AN fittings, which that's their standardized color, I just don't like it. I get that, you know, you can see red and you can see blue and you'll know if it's there and if it's accounted for and you can tighten it. Not my cup of tea aesthetically. It would drive me nuts. I don't like the stainless braided line. I don't like the aesthetic of that. That's why you see me run, you know, the nylon black stuff. It's just aesthetics. It all comes down to that. I'm very particular with how things look. Especially, you know, when I'm like paying for them and there's not really much difference between the two, and sometimes it's even cheaper for me to make things look the way I think they should. So the problem is, again, like, you can't just come in and buy all red anodized fittings. Like, there's people that probably don't want the blue with their red, but you can't do that. You know, it would be, you'd spend so much money trying to piece everything together and have duplicate, you know, wasted ends, if you will. So that's where I kind of come in with a nickel, and where I typically wouldn't run it and I would want the blue anodized, the nickel. It's a complementary color, and in all honesty, it just simplifies things a ton, and I can appreciate that as well. But this is, again, HiPoTek solution. These will be the fuel rails that go on our Hughes prepped air gap, and it's going to make things look a lot better. And we'll have the ability to plug in. Again, you can get these in various configurations, including without this at all, but in my opinion, it just makes sense to have that factory location connection. Push lock hose, don't have to change that. Plug and play as much as you can make it, essentially. So stainless hardware, I like that Richard went to that length. And again, you can get these not only for the air gap from Hughes, you can get it for a standard air gap that you modify and drill yourself. You can also get it for the M1 intake. So he's got all your bases covered. Again, just check out his website, HiPoTek.com. And you can kind of come in, spec out what you want, what fittings you want, you know, if you want the accessory kit, if you want this port for the factory push lock or not, and just go to town in that manner. But again, stainless legs and brackets are included, stainless hardware is included, and it would be 3/32 hex key that you will need to install that stainless hardware. So with that said, that's about all she wrote for these HiPoTek fuel rails. They're a very cool item. Again, a little pricey, yes, not extremely out of line, particularly, again, when you consider this isn't the LS marketplace. We don't have, you know, like 20 different vendors beating down the door to sell you their fuel rails. This is sort of a forgotten motor. I never felt like Chrysler themselves ever did enough to develop and push, you know, the performance side and capabilities of the Magnum. And to have someone like Richard who's still all about the Magnum and actually cranks out specialty high-end products to support the Magnum, you just got to appreciate that and take it for what you can. So I appreciate him, Hughes, a couple other places, you know, that actually do dedicate and make products for the Magnum, because otherwise it would be, You know, you got to scrounge through the junkyards, try to find obsolete parts, try to, you know, modify everything stock to make it fit, go scouring around swap meets and online sales trying to find obsolete parts. This is extremely appreciated. Again, you know, the last Magnum engine, I guess, would have come off, what, 01, 02, somewhere in that time frame before the Hemi took over. And the Hemi has a lot more support now than the Magnum did. But the Magnum, again, it was just kind of never really fleshed out. Never really saw the full potential from the manufacturer or from the aftermarket, in my opinion. So the fact there's still enough of us out there, you know, Dakotas, Durangos, Rams, Grand Cherokees, swapping into A-bodies, whatever it might be, that say, hey, I will pay the money, make a fuel rail that fits this and looks good. That means a lot to me, and I'm appreciative of that. So on that note, I will have these suckers linked down below. I'll also just have a generic link to Richard's website. Again, he's fairly quick to respond to your questions. But again, I think it's kind of like a small operation, just something that he does kind of out of a passion for the hobby, I suppose. And keep that in mind if there's anything on there. He's got quite a few, I mean, a pretty extensive parts catalog. Especially if you are a Dakota person, he has kind of like a lot of almost one-off pieces, you know. Especially, again, if you are going to the track, and by that I mean drag racing. So that's kind of what he's into. That's what he's going to cater to. And if that falls in line with what you're into, it's a beautiful combination. But with all that said, let me know what you think of these suckers. They are available in a couple other different finishes. I haven't even hit on that. You can get these natural. You can get them red. I think black anodized. There might be something else, maybe a pre-polished. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it does not have to be blue. I know some of you are going to be like black, red, you know, natural, polished, whatever. But for what we're doing, I thought this would be nice. I think it's going to highlight, stand out a little bit, tie in with some of my other accents, and ultimately just look way better than the factory fuel rails. Which, factory fuel rails don't look great. You can reuse them, but when you've invested into the intake, and some other items like we're going to be doing that I don't want to spoil just yet, this is the way to go, in my opinion. So with that said, LoneStarMopars.com is the website. Make sure you're following along on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, all three at Lone Star Mopars. If you're looking for Ram Revival specific stuff, not sure what I'm going to do in the future because this is filmed way, way in advance of you ever seeing it, but I do have Ram Revival Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, so maybe that'll be up and going by that point in time. But with that said, I do hope you enjoyed. Hopefully some of you will need this and would have been completely unaware that this was available. Another very popular item that Richard sells is kind of his HiPoTek custom grind cams. They're just comp custom grinds, but he's kind of spec'd them out. Again, it's not like he got into Magnums in late 2019. He's been doing this since the heyday. It's the tried and true stuff. If you're bored, pull up HiPoTek 210. You can find a couple of video clips. Pretty rowdy cam in the Magnum, I must say. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts on this. Which one you prefer, again, getting back to the meat and potatoes question of the video. But with that said, I'm getting hot, I'm getting thirsty, probably going to hit inside. Ram Revival is in full swing. We got a lot of cool things coming. I do hope you're enjoying that. If you have not subscribed, I encourage you to do so. Also, if you subscribe and you want to be notified when we release new videos, which is typically midweek for Ram Revival stuff, ring the bell, jump your Charger or your Ram across the creek, and just maybe YouTube will let you know that the video is live. But with that said, thanks for watching. I will catch y'all back here for more from the shop.